Those who cannot change their minds cannot change anything. This is Success with Srini. If it's professional growth, personal growth, financial growth, or relationship growth, we're talking about it. One show, one topic. Diving in deep with practical and useful insights that will change and transform your life. Welcome to Success with Srini. And now your host, Srini Sarapalli.
Welcome back. Happy Thursday morning to you. Today on the podcast, again, I'm talking about an incredible book, an amazing author, and above all, a man of amazing talents, his values, his principles, and his leadership and his contribution to entrepreneurs in Silicon Valley and beyond. He's amazing. I'm going to talk about him just in a second, but before I go any further, let me ask you this question, and you help me answer this, which is, do you know anyone who is doing something that they are not really good at, but they're doing it for some reason that you cannot explain why? And whatever they're doing, that is completely opposite to whatever skills, talents, and the best gifts they have within them. Their passions are somewhere, their skills are somewhere, their talents are somewhere, their whole line of accomplishment is completely somewhere else, but they're doing exactly the opposite of that. Do you know anyone? I meet a lot of people like this. They're doing things that I don't understand why they are doing. And over the years, through numerous consultations, numerous interactions, here is what I found out. I think maybe because of ignorance, people do things because of ignorance. Maybe they're in the wrong job, doing the wrong business because of greed. Maybe because of their ego. Or maybe for some other reasons. Maybe it's because of social pressures. Now, this problem has been addressed numerous times through multiple authors, multiple philosophers. Many people have addressed this. And one of the core point is you need to be authentic to the work that you do. This point has been driven by many. And there is a lot of literature on this. So if you are not authentic to what you're doing, that means you are somehow incubating a level of unhappiness within you. And that means you're doing the work that you're doing without being self-actualized. So when you're not self-actualized, no amount of money, no number of titles, no symbolic rewards, material gains, none of those things will ever make you happy. So there is some degree of self-actualization involved in all this. The question is, why do people do what they do? Despite of knowing that that's not their A game, that's not their best game. So many, many years ago, I came across an incredible story. I want to share the story here first before I talk about this incredible book and this amazing author. So there was this individual who was looking for something, was searching for something on a piece of land. And there was this another individual who was walking on the bridge. He was crossing the bridge. He saw this man looking for something on the ground below the bridge. And this man keeps on crossing the bridge multiple times over the next few hours. And then finally, he can't stop himself. He can't contain himself. And he yells, he shouts at this man below the bridge. He says, "Hey, I've been walking around multiple times over this bridge over the last few hours, and I see you're searching for something. What is that you're searching?" And this man, right, from below the bridge, he says, "Oh, I lost my wedding ring, and I'm looking for it." And then this man from the bridge, he says, "Do you know where you lost it? Because this is such a big place." And the man says, "Yes, I know where I lost it. It's on the other side of the bridge. That's where I lost it." And this man on the bridge is like, "Really? You lost in the other side of the bridge, but you're looking on this side, the opposite side?" "Yeah." "So why?" "Because there is light here." You get the point? See, that's all how many of us are. we don't know what we are searching and we're doing. We know it's not the right thing to do. And then we are in this loop. It's very hard to get out of this loop. Okay. Let's stop here for a second. I think this was 2013, 2014, 2015. I'm not sure about the timeline. I was invited to speak at GITPRO. GITPRO is a organization where all techies come together. They exchange ideas, and it's a networking, idea exchange, and educational event. The event happens once a year, but there's a yearly conference they do. So I was invited to speak at the GITPRO conference. So I was speaking there. And as a part of that conference, there were multiple keynote speakers. And one of the keynote speakers was Dr. Prasad Kaipa. And this was the first time I met him there, first time I was introduced, even though I heard about him before. And I made sure that I listened to the his closing keynote presentation. He was the last keynote for the event. And at the end of the keynote, I asked him, I said, would it be okay for you to come in as a guest on my radio show? So I invited him on my radio show. And I'll tell you, his oratory, his philosophy, his values, absolutely incredible at the event, but also on my radio show. Now, when he came to the show, he got his book with him. He said, Srini, this is a gift for you. So nice of him, so generous of him. And, every time somebody gives me a book, I don't take books for free, and I kept saying that multiple times. When you take a book from someone, there's a tremendous amount of responsibility that comes with it. They are handing over their, who knows how many years and how many tears have gone into writing a book. And they give it out. And maybe they see something, whoever they're giving it out. So Dr. Kaipa, gave this to me. And in that moment, I took it as a tremendous amount of responsibility. Just like you leaving your baby with someone, that's how I see it. And I'm given the responsibility to babysit the baby. So I got the book. And, every time that the responsibility is not like they're asking anything in return. It's just that every time you see them, you feel like, oh, they gave me their book and I didn't read the book. It's guilt. It's guilt. I never wanted to be in a situation like that. So by the time I made a promise to myself, by the time I see him the next time, I should read this book. And that's the case everywhere. Anytime I have received a book from someone, an author or a speaker, I made sure that next time, before I meet them the second time or the following time, I should have read their book, which so far I haven't yet missed on that commitment to myself. So from smart to wise, acting and leading with wisdom is the book. Now, this book is co-written, of course, Dr. Prasad Kaipa, the author, but also is co-written by Ravi Nadjou. It's an incredible book. I have read this book. And there is something that I want to share in this book, something I found here in this book. Now, the point Dr. Kaipa and Nadjou make in this book, specifically on the page 85 of this book, they say there is a gap. We all understand, everybody knows there is a gap between who we are and what we do. There is a gap. And the way to fill this gap is by becoming authentic to ourselves. That also a lot of people talk about. But they call this gap, they give a specific word, they coin the term, they call it the courage gap. There is lack of courage somewhere. That is why this is not happening. Interesting. Right? It's interesting that other people look at us and they can precisely identify our uniqueness. But we are not able to identify our uniqueness. Why? Because we choose to fit in. We are seeking approval. Don't know from whom. Maybe from our own selves, or the way we were conditioned from birth. Who knows? And they highlight this in the book, in this chapter. They further say this. This is also evident in leaders in corporations. And leaders pay the least attention to courage gap. And because of self-deception and lack of self-awareness. When there is self-deception and lack of self-awareness, this prevents the leaders from pursuing their deeper desires and deeper intentions. You see, a leader is constrained at that level because they don't know how to bridge the courage gap. And it's amazing the way they mention this. And they give an example of John Mackay, the CEO of Whole Foods, who started Whole Foods. And it's an amazing small little story about John Mackay. He started Whole Foods with a $45,000 of his own money. And then just because he was an enthusiast, he wanted to live a healthy life. And there were not that many options. So he found a gap in the marketplace. So he just he started doing this. And then he became successful from that point on. But there's a backstory to this story, which is he dropped out of UT Austin. And he wanted to hitchhike to New York City. And his mother said, if you leave the door and go, that's the end of it. And John Mackay, in that moment, he says that if this is what is our relationship, okay, I'm better off leaving. He leaves. And John Mackay kind of attributes his success to the decision he made in that point in time when he discovered himself. You see, and again, there are some resources Dr. Kaipa talks about in the book, which I highly suggest that you get this book, buy the book, read the book. And there are so many different frames and angles to leadership. This book is filled with wisdom. And this is the springboard for you to get to. And this has, in my understanding, I raised my understanding reading this book. So get the book. That's obviously the point of this podcast episode. But also, you cannot really bridge the gap unless you ask some deep questions. And the last few days I have been talking about, we all are self-imprisoned unless we are self-discovered. And the self-discovery happens through we only discover ourselves, and we only can release ourselves from our own self-imprisonment. That's why it's called self-imprisonment. And we do that by deep questioning. And that's one way to bridge the gap, obviously. You can't take anything for granted. You can't take anybody's opinion for granted and their expectations for granted. You do it yourself. I hope today's podcast episode is helpful. Just on a side note, I've been subsequent to that, I read the book, and then I met Dr. Kaipa again at the Thai conference. Over the years, we have exchanged text messages. I'm lucky to actually have come across such an incredible mind who explains such complex, paradigms of thinking in such simple terms. It's amazing. I hope look him up, follow his work, and I'll promise you will bless me in your thoughts one day for just mentioning this about him, about his work, about this book to you. It's amazing. That's all for now on this podcast. I'll catch up with you tomorrow. In the meantime, if you think this podcast episode is helpful, do me a favor, write a review, rate this podcast. And if you think anybody, a friend of yours, maybe a family member of yours will benefit from this podcast episode, by all means, please send it to them. It's easy, simple. Copy the link and just text them. And before you know it, I'll be here tomorrow with you. Till such time, wherever you are, be safe. Bye now.
You've been listening to Success with Srini. Srini is committed to changing and transforming your life, whether it's professional growth, personal growth, financial growth, or relationship growth. Srini has positively touched the lives of over 1 million people through his seminars, webinars, workshops, and radio shows. We hope you've enjoyed the show. Make sure to like, rate, and review. And we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hit up the YouTube channel at Success with Srini and the website at www.srinisarapalli.com. Remember, improvement begins with I. See you next time on Success with Srini.